Following our day of Jubilation on Saturday, which features all antique dolls, we're going to be introducing a different category of dolls to you for a category of dolls that we kind of hope to see develop in the next few years, because we see it starting to brew a little bit, bubble up a little bit of interest among more than a very specialized group of collectors. And this is the subject of the art doll. Now, I would argue that everything I've been showing you up until now is an art doll. The doll is art. The doll as a manifestation of someone's notion of what a child or a woman or a scene should look like, either in play or in presentation. What I'm now going to talk to you about is specifically the doll as an art movement. And you're wondering, well, what in the world are you holding in your arms? Those are not art dolls, which you automatically think are new dolls. But art dolls are antique dolls as well. I'm going to hold these for a minute, talk to you just a second, and then I'm going to back out of the way and keep talking while our wonderful photographer just keeps showing you all of the dolls in the category I'm talking about. In my arms are a wonderful doll called Theriault, designed by an American artist. You think of her as a doll maker, but she was an artist, Grace Story Putnam. You know her by Lo. She also designed this wonderful doll called a Theriault. And I will talk to you more about that in a little bit. But she was an artist, first and foremost. I talked to you a few moments ago when I showed you a doll called Virginia, Ginny for short, designed by Oscar Hitt, an American illustrator for his cartoon strip. This is another version of Virginia, Ginny for short. Is this an art doll? Is it an antique doll? What is it? Let's talk about that a little more. I'm going to back out of the scene now and give you some thoughts that I've been having. If I mention art doll, oh, do you collect art dolls? Or if I hear a collector said, I collect art dolls, and the other people in the room suddenly get a blank look on their face, I know what they're thinking. Oh, no, I'm an antique doll collector. I don't know anything about that subject. I don't want to know. Well, I propose it's time for that to change. It's time to expand your horizon. It's time to open your mind a little bit. So let's define what is an artist doll. It could be, to my way of thinking, and more I thought about it, how in the world do we define an artist doll? So I started making a list of what I think could be some of the categories. For example, it could be any one of these. It could have been inspired by illustrations, flat dimensional illustrations by an artist, and then evolving into a doll in the hands of others. And I'll give you the big example of all, Rose O'Neil. She was an illustrator. She was a sculptor, not a sculptor, she was a painter and illustrator. She designed her Cupid in a series of stories, and then it was made into doll form. Sure, she worked on cloth Cupids later on, but when it was produced in Germany and sold as dolls, she did not sculpt that doll. It was made in the factory in Germany, and she would approve the molds. In fact, some of them she didn't approve at all because she didn't like the look. Another way it could be created by an artist, and only one is made, what is commonly known as OOAK, one of a kind. And we'll talk about this more in a little bit. A third category of artist doll could be one that's created partially by an artist from components acquired elsewhere. So an artist might design a head, but then they might get body parts that are either commercially produced or someone else is making them. They may buy eyes from someone else. They might acquire wigs from someone else, or someone else is making a costume. So what has the artist made? Is it an artist doll, an artist conception, or artist made? Fourth, it could be designed by the artist, but mostly created by other hands under the direct supervision of the artist. And I can give you examples of dolls in every one of these categories, which I will be happy to be doing in a few moments. And finally, it could be made commercially in larger factories. Historically, our antique dolls that we collect and that we talk about so much, most of those dolls were originally sculpted and designed by an artist, by a sculptor. We just don't know who they were. Now, we may not know because they were a paid employee of the factory, but they were sculpted by an individual. Doesn't that make them an art doll? In many cases, they were famous sculptors. Theriault, for example, the artists employed by the Cameron Reinhardt Company, for example. But they weren't known at the time because historically they didn't want their names known. They didn't want them known for commercial purposes because they were a fine art artist and they didn't want to be thought of as having produced something commercially. This began to change in the early 1900s. The artist name became an important thing, which brings us back to point A, dolls that were inspired by illustrations. And let's count the people that we can think of. Grace Story Putnam, Corey Rockwell, Rose O'Neill, on and on, Jeannie Orsini, all of these people, illustrators, and then dolls were designed from their illustrations. These are really important. So when I hear this, sometimes I hear people say, oh, I only collect one of a kind. And then I think, well, what do you mean by one of a kind? What does one of a kind mean? It's the same doll, but this is a different dress? Is the same doll, but you did this one had different trim or a different wig or something, and you gave it a different name, so you call it a different doll? What makes it different? One of the things that makes it more possible to have one-of-a-kind dolls these days that you could not have in past times is the different materials that are being used. Think about it. Originally, the artists, what is the most common material? I know I'm sort of rambling here, folks, but I've gotten really excited about this subject, and I really want to try to develop some kind of guidepost or thing, so I want you to help me. And if I raise any questions to you, let's delve into these, and let's try to make a framework or a formula for collecting artist dolls so it becomes part of the whole evolution of our doll collections. And we don't have a point in time at which we say, oh no, I don't collect those. They're new, they're artist dolls. Let's look at it differently. And for example, what do you think defines it one of a kind? What makes it different from anything else? Must it be completely, totally made by an artist? What material must it be made of? One of the things that makes one of a kind more possible today than it did years ago is the different kinds of materials that are available. And I'm just trying to learn about this myself. But materials like the polymer clay, which doesn't require extensive kiln ovens to bake. You can bake it, you mold it, you sculpt it, and then you bake it in your kitchen oven. And that hardens it and forms it. Well, that does make it possible to form one-of-a-kind dolls. That's a different material that makes these new one-of-a-kind ventures possible. And an artist can sit at a table and sculpt a head similarly to the way an artist can put a piece of canvas on a board and do a painting. And that painting will be different than 3 others they've done that might be very closely related, but it is different and it is entirely their work. These are all questions we need to talk about and bring up even more. Some of the things that also, problems that I think that we need to have about in the study of art dolls. And while I'm talking, he's showing you different examples I put up here of people whose work I really think is extraordinary. And I just had the privilege of cataloging all of these that were going to be sold in our auction on June 8th. And so I've had a little more hands-on and seen some of the things that people work with. The dolls that I have put up here now are all, with about 4 exceptions. This is an exception. This is. I think that those are the only ones. Everything else is one of a kind. And these are really extraordinary. I found people whose work is so amazing. Look at some of the miniature work that's being done. Look at this doll that is like in the manner of Isana Walker, but done by Gail Wilson, oil painting on cloth. I continue to love any of the artwork that's done on cloth because that is such a traditional way of making a doll with cloth. And people who can achieve that, wow, that's great. This is one of my favorites, this Maggie Iacano doll. I love her dolls. They're not, quote, one of a kind. They're very, very small production. I'll talk about that in a second, but extraordinary work also. Anki Donnan, who works with more traditional materials. Look at these wonderful cloth dolls. These are absolutely extraordinary. I could just go on and on. Akira Blunt, who was past president of NADA for several years, has this whole series of these wonderful, fantastical dolls that I just love. Look, she has a squirrel mask, and there's this wonderful woman, and her little tunic top is made of pine cones. Extraordinary, imaginative work. This is cloth back here, tissue cloth. It is wonderful. Dorothy Hoskins, a NIADA artist. Very, very fine. I could just talk forever about these. I love The Two Sisters. The title of it is done by Laura Scottolini, and The Two Sisters, and the title is Quarrel, because obviously they are having an argument about who's holding the teddy bear. You look at your antique dolls that you love to position them, you love the scenes you can make of them. Are you honestly telling me that these playful children do not offer you the same opportunities as others made 100 years previously? Of course they do. There's so many opportunities, whether it's of children, of fashion, of fantasy. This is a great, wonderful field to get into and to learn more about. And I'm kind of excited about it, and I hope to get the rest of you a bit excited about it too. I was talking about immigrants a few minutes ago, and this one is just an absolutely wonderful doll. This was previously in the Weil Museum of Doll Art, and by a very, very, let me pull it up and show you here. It has the information on the bottom. It's Immigrants, 1840, handmade doll by Maria Aaron. And that is look at the woman's face. And look at the sleeping child at her side. What a piece of work. So it doesn't have articulation, but it is a scene that is heartrending. And then you have other dolls that have infinite articulation. It's always been a big focus of the Maggie Iacono dolls, of the Lynn Roche dolls, of the Sandroider dolls. They wanted dolls that had all of the same articulation that antique dolls would have. Some of them had costumes that were constructed permanently onto the dolls. Isn't that similar to so many of the antique dolls we collect, that their costumes are permanently adhered? Please open your mind, expand, learn to at least study and look at and appreciate and distinguish which of these dolls in the great, long, and evolving history of doll collection you can find would fit within what you would consider worthwhile, beautiful, important, and something you'd like to come home to each day. And finally, after all of my sermon-y lectures, please forgive me, I wanted to share a little fun with you, because when it all comes down to it, collecting and our auctions should all be about fun. So one of the great items we have in the upcoming auction on Saturday is this early 1900s children's barber chair. It is so wonderful. Name of the manufacturer is on the bottom, and it is so you could raise it and lower it according to the height of the child or the height of the barber. And on the front of it, all original, is this carved wooden horse's head with the original painting and finish on it. It's absolutely wonderful. Well, I love this, and I have an employee that I can't believe didn't quit, because he had to transport it to the vehicle himself, and it's a sturdy chair, let's put it that way. But at any rate, here we have, it's going to be in the auction. Stuart came in, I'm just going to share this piece of levity with you. Stuart came in and looked at it, and he said, "What in the world were they thinking?" Do you know the category of things that we are accumulating a list of about manufacturers of children's things called "What Were They Thinking?" Like the Bébé Gourmand, that the food goes down through a hole in the foot. Well, in this barber chair, what were they thinking? And Stuart wrote a whole Facebook listing about it under his Stuart Holbrook Theriault, and you should go back and read it because it's really funny. And he raised to me, which I hadn't thought of, what would a little boy do? He sits in this barber chair. What is he going to want to do? Sure, he's going to lean forward, pet the horse, grab the leashes, play with the horse. And what is the barber doing? Standing there with his scissors in his hand, about to cut the little boy's hair, when suddenly he jerks forward and leans on the horse. Well, it's a good laugh, and it's fun, but the barber chair did exist. It was real. In fact, I found the name of the company that made them, and it was evidently one of their successful pieces in the early 1900s. And it's just a great story, and it's a great relic of childhood, and that's part of what our collecting is all about. And I hope you get a laugh and enjoy it. And please come and see us. Either come virtually, watch the auction online, which it's the whole auction you can stream and listen to online, and come in person. That's even better. Hope to see you there. Thanks so much for listening.